Alright, so for this final project, I decided to watch the documentary titled Poverty, Politics, and Profit. This was available on PBS. Yes, my name is Anthony Rosenthal. So, introduction and key thesis. This documentary is about, it investigates the affordable housing crisis and examines how the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, designed to help over 2.2 million low income families, is failing due to underfunding, political opposition, and private exploitation. Main argument of the film, it exposes how federal housing policy, private profit motives, and local political decisions determine who receives one of the most basic necessities, which is stable shelter. My first impression, I thought it was honestly pretty emotionally compelling. The human stories of families turned away repeatedly by landlords make systemic failure visible and deeply personal. It kind of goes back to, I mean, there seemed to be a lot of discrimination um, in the film, like during these times when these developers would bid these new affordable housing projects in these wealthier neighborhoods because of the opportunities and the better schools and everything that would really uplift the families that moved there because of the voucher program, ultimately being disregarded and opposed because these people have a lot of there's a lot of stereotypes and a lot of discrimination, a lot of racism, and so much more. So, this is the affordable housing crisis in summary. There are 7 million shortage of affordable housing rental units for extremely low income renters. This data is pretty old though, because that's when the documentary was made. I'm sure it's probably worse now. 1 in 4 eligible households actually receive federal housing assistance, and 10 to 15 years is the average wait time on housing voucher waiting lists in many cities, which is so incredible. The amount of how much your life can change in 10 to 15 years almost makes this just not even a viable option for many. So, poverty and economic inequality. The income squeeze. So, many families spend 50 to 70% of their income on rent, leaving almost nothing for food, healthcare, or childcare. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. So, housing stability causes stress, poor health, school disruption, and job loss, each one making it harder to escape poverty. Not personal failure. The documentary shows that poverty is a product of structural conditions, stagnating wages, rising rents, and limited access to opportunity. I believe this really goes back to a lot of the coursework we've done, a lot of the kind of reflections based on, a lot of people think that those who are in poverty did it voluntarily, or, they did something on purpose in order to get themselves in the situation. And oftentimes this is not the case. It is the failure of the system that worsens these conditions for these people, because the safety nets and the whole structure of how our country and economy function is inherently broken. So, the politics, policy, and profit. Um, Federal policy. So the HUD Section 8 chronically underfunded, and only 1 in 4 families receive the assistance. The local assistance, so the zoning and permits block affordable housing, wealthier neighborhoods exclude low-income projects, and private profit. Developers profit from LIHTC subsidies, and substandard conditions persist under private management. So there's some theories of justice. I'm sorry, one moment. All right. How should society allocate basic necessities, including housing, among its members? Then there's also the Rawls veil of ignorance. Design society without knowing your place in it. Would you accept today's housing system? I sure wouldn't. And housing as a social good. Certain goods, shelter, healthcare, education should not be distributed by social need. Should be distributed by social need, not by market logic alone. Here's one course. I'm sorry. Course connection, the oppression privilege. So, structural oppression. So, the zoning and policy barriers, local zoning and permitting processes systematically block affordable housing from wealthier neighborhoods, concentrating poverty geographically, which makes it more difficult for these families to rise up economically. Discriminatory practices, landlords refuse housing vouchers, and discriminatory screening practices create invisible walls that exclude low-income renters and people of color. Privilege and invisibility, invisible advantage, those with economic means, access stable housing, and all the education, health, and opportunity that come with it, without confronting the barriers that define daily life in low-income families. Hard work is not enough. Families in the documentary work diligently, yet remain trapped. The film makes it clear that the barriers and structural are not personal. Teaching and ethics. Alright, so human dignity. Every person possesses inherent dignity. Safe housing is essential to living with dignity, and its denial is a moral harm. The preferential option for the poor. Society must prioritize the needs of the most vulnerable. Are our housing policies designed with the poor in mind? The common good, economic and social systems must serve all people, not just a few, and a system that enriches investors while leaving millions unhoused fails the standard. So then there's also solidarity and moral responsibility. We share collective responsibility for one another's well-being. Stable housing benefits entire communities, not just individuals. Ethics, issues, and moral questions. So who bears the cost? And who holds the responsibility? So the tensions, housing as a human right versus housing as a market commodity. Human dignity violated by unsafe, unstable living conditions. Public subsidies captured by private profit. Vulnerable populations, children, elderly, disabled, are left unprotected. And the moral obligation. Society bears the collective responsibility for basic needs, and the UN Declaration of Human Rights, shelter is a recognized right. Profit incentivizes must not override human welfare, and policy must prioritize dignity over market efficiency. I apologize if my voice or cadence sounds a little strange. I just got my wisdom teeth removed, and it hurts a lot to speak at the moment. Alright, so conclusion and key takeaways. Housing is justice. Affordable housing is not only an economic issue, it is a fundamental social justice issue tied to dignity, opportunity, and fairness. Systems shape lives. Poverty, politics, and profit are deeply interconnected. Policy decisions without funding, zoning, and oversight directly determine which families live with dignity and which are left behind. And it's an unfinished challenge, so unaffordability in the housing market remains one of the most pressing and unresolved crises in the United States, and advocacy and structural reform are urgent moral responsibilities. Here are my references, just the one for the documentary. Thank you for watching.